This is a video that I really wish I didn't have to make, but I think that it's important to do so, as the motorsport community has been coming to terms with the death of 18-year-old Dutch driver Dilano van Hoff, who died in a crash at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit while racing in the Formula Regional European Championship by Alpine last weekend. The loss of another young driver coming up through the junior ranks really has left everyone in shock, and it has raised fresh doubts over the safety of Spa's layout, in particular the Eau Rouge and Radillon section, which is just prior to where Van Hoff's accident took place. The crash happened during the final lap of the second race of that weekend, and although cameras were unable to pick up how the incident unfolded, it is believed that Van Hoff lost control of his car just as he approached the Kemmel Straight before hitting the barrier, and his car was brought back onto the racing line where he was hit by another driver. A major factor in the incident, probably the defining factor, was the spray, as the race took place in wet conditions, and this meant that drivers who were behind the incident as it initially unfolded weren't able to react in time to what was going on ahead of them. Van Hoff would sadly succumb to the injuries he suffered in the multi-car collision, and his death marks the second fatal accident at Spa in the last 4 years, after Antoine Hubert lost his life in a crash in a Formula 2 race in 2019, ironically at the same part of the track. Following Hubert's death, we saw a massive push to improve the safety standards of the Eau Rouge Radillon section at Spa, and this led to the redevelopment of that part of the circuit for 2022, where we saw a much wider runoff at the entry of Eau Rouge on the left hand side, and after they rise over the top of Eau Rouge into Radillon on the right hand side, with the barriers pushed much further back. This latest accident is only going to ask more questions as to whether further modifications are needed to this part of the circuit, particularly to slow the cars down, because although spray was probably the main factor in Van Hoff's accident, the speed at which the cars go, even in the lower categories, they're going over well over 100 miles an hour. In Formula 1, you're doing around 180, building up to 200 miles an hour as you go through Eau Rouge and Radillon onto the Kemmel Straight. So is there a case for them to possibly slow down Eau Rouge, or even do they need to even put a chicane in like they did in 1994? That chicane that was there in 94, albeit temporarily, was there because the FIA and the Grand Prix Drivers Association had sort of forged an alliance in a bid to try and improve the safety standards of Formula 1 at that particular time, after Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger's fatal accidents at the San Marino Grand Prix earlier in that season. The main issue with installing a chicane or trying to slow down the Eau Rouge and Radillon section is that once you go ahead and make changes, you are effectively losing part of Formula 1 history, because it is arguably the most famous corner in all of Formula 1. But it does beg the question as to whether Eau Rouge is now simply too fast and too dangerous for modern motorsport. Although Eau Rouge has always been a fast part of the circuit, due to the steep nature of the corner, it meant it was always difficult to take it flat out. That was until 2007, when the circuit went through a major redevelopment and changes were made to Eau Rouge to make it much flatter and much quicker, which meant it was much easier to take it flat out without having to lift. Formula 1 drivers expressed their views and opinions on the incident itself and how it could have been avoided and what needed to be changed for the future. Lance Stroll was in particular very vocal about the Eau Rouge corner needing to change, saying that every time we go through there, we are putting our lives on the line. Max Verstappen, on the other hand, felt that it wasn't necessarily the track that was to blame for the incident, feeling that the conditions that the race took place in was something that needed to be looked at for the future, as it was an unnecessary risk to let the drivers race in these conditions. There is no doubt that the FIA will begin an investigation into the incident to understand what were the main causes that contributed to the crash and what can be improved for the future. And the outcome of this investigation will no doubt define the next steps that are taken. I don't think that it's inconceivable to think that changes could be made as early as the Belgian Grand Prix, which is taking place in just a few weeks' time. But we know that spray was a major factor in Van Hoff's accident, and the FIA is already making developments in this area, as they are trying to help reduce the amount of spray that is kicked up by Grand Prix cars to improve visibility for drivers by introducing a type of wheel arch or mudguard to the rear of the car. This naturally is a very sore subject, because Spa, for me, is my favourite Formula 1 circuit on the calendar. In my opinion, it is the ultimate racing circuit of them all, the ultimate challenge for any racing driver, because it has high-speed sections, hard braking zones, tight apexes, flat-out sections. It runs through the Ardennes forest, which means the weather is always unpredictable. Add all of that together and you've got the ultimate event. But you simply cannot relent on the pursuit to make Formula 1 and motorsport in general as safe as possible, and Formula 1 and the FIA should never stop in that quest to make sure that all drivers are as safe as possible. Motorsport will always be dangerous, that is a fact, but attempting to make it safer should never be frowned upon. Ultimately, I don't think we should be too hasty on making changes to the Eau Rouge and Radillon section just yet, not least until the FIA has conducted its investigation into the incident. But if it is recommended that this section of track needs to be modified in order to slow the cars down, then although we'll be losing one of the most iconic pieces of tarmac in racing, it would be a step towards making motorsport safer and ensuring that we do not have any repeat incidents in the future. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a young driver coming through the ranks or if it's an established driver racing in the higher categories. Motorsport always is left hurting when it loses one of its own. Dilano van Hoff was just 18 years old. He had his whole career ahead of him. He had dreams, he had aspirations. He was world champion in the F4 Spanish Championship in 2021, and this year was his third season racing in the FRECA series for MP Motorsport. There was no doubt he had already shown promise that he was going to further his career and go on to achieve great things. So it's such a shame that we've lost him at such a young age. Obviously, we send all our condolences to the Van Hoff family at this incredibly difficult time, and I think that it's really important that we do whatever we can to make sure that Dilano's memory lives on. But that's it for this video, guys. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you make of the Eau Rouge Radillon debate. Do you think that Spa needs to make further changes to make the circuit safer? Also, don't forget to leave a like on this video and to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.